About 4 years ago, I heard whisperings of a lens. A lens like no other lens out there. A lens that allowed you to shoot the 21mm perspective on a Leica rangefinder without any viewfinder attachments. When I heard that, I was like, what? You see, I love the 21mm perspective. There's nothing like it. Wide enough to capture so much, but yet when handled with control, it can sometimes still feel like a 24 or even a 28mm lens. A lens that allows you to not just capture subjects, but the sides of your peripheral vision as well. If you're interested in more of that, check out the video I made called Why 21mm, a review on the 21mm Voigtlander Nocton, as well as the recent travel vlog I did to Hong Kong, where I spent the entire trip shooting just the 21mm perspective. But as a lover of 21mm, honestly, for the Leica system, this perspective poses a few problems. Firstly, we don't quite have a 21mm lens that's small, compact, lightweight, while still having a reasonable aperture. Like a compact 21mm f2.0 Summicron would be amazing. Now we are stuck at f3.4, 2.8 or f1.4, but the 21mm Summilux is just huge. Besides that, the Leica rangefinder also only has the widest perspective of 28mm. Anything wider and you'll need to use viewfinder attachments. External viewfinders that sit on top of the hot shoe of your camera. And there are some advantages of that. External viewfinders give you more compositional accuracy along the horizontal axis when making pictures. But practically speaking, it means that if you're metering using your camera, you need to meter with one viewfinder and then switch over to the external one. And also with the hot shoe viewfinder, it's much more troublesome to use a flash. So practically speaking, there are some downsides. Now these aren't a huge problem and I've been making do for years, but if only we had a more elegant solution. Enter the Bessa R4M. Full review on the channel as well, but the R4M is a rangefinder with built-in 21mm frame lines. A dream come true, yes? Not quite, because sadly the R4M's build quality and user experience just doesn't quite hit the mark of a mechanical Leica. It's slightly hollow, the film advance isn't great. Don't get me wrong, it's a good camera, but just not quite good enough to take my main Leica MP out of my hands. So what if there was a 21mm lens that would allow me to still use my Leica MP without needing any external viewfinders? Did such a thing exist? Well, apparently, yes. Now, my research on this isn't the most in-depth because all I can present to you are whisperings from old forums. But somewhere in the late 90s, the early 2000s, an ex-Leica technician, Reinhold Muller, and Tom Andersson started collaborating on modifying 21mm f2.8 Elmarits to solve this very problem. And they did so by using goggles. Now, goggles existed in many different shapes and sizes for Leica lenses. With the 50mm dual range Summicron, goggles allow you to make pictures at really close distances. With 135 lenses, goggles magnified the view so that it was more zoomed in. But in order to solve the 21mm field of view problem with a rangefinder, they used 0.7 magnification goggles. These goggles were taken from 35mm lenses from the early days. These lenses were made to allow you to use 35mm lenses on Leica M3s that only had 50mm frame lines. And how they worked was, by placing an additional lens in front of the camera's viewfinder, they shrunk down everything in front of it by a factor of 0.7. So 50mm times 0.7 equals 35mm frame lines. What Mr. Muller and what Mr. Andersson did was go, hey, if we took 0.7 widening goggles and placed them at the front of a 21mm lens, wouldn't that effectively make 28mm just about 21? And so they did. Now, it wasn't as easy as just unscrewing goggles from the 35 and then like screwing it on the 21 because the focusing would be out of alignment as well. So after adapting those goggles over, a focusing cam modification was needed as well to ensure that the rangefinder was still accurate. But all that said and done, they came up with the dream. A Leica 21mm f2.8 lens with a 0.7 magnification attachment that allow you to use the 21mm perspective without any hot shoe viewfinders. Would this be the Bessa R4M but with Leica build quality? There was only one way to find out. So yes, I did it. I managed to acquire one. In all my time in photography, I've heard of rumors of this lens, but I've never ever seen one come up for sale ever before, not to mention get one in my hands. I mean, if you do a quick search on the rarest Leica lenses documented, they point to historical lenses that were made in quantities of 100, maybe 200, that go for auction at ridiculous prices. But I'm not even sure if 10 of these lenses were made, maybe 20, I don't know. And those historical lenses are rare and scarce because of story and tradition, say like a super rare 50mm Summilux. Yes, they're rare as collectibles, but you could arguably shoot a different vintage 50mm Summilux and get a very similar experience and picture. But these 21mm lenses are unique because they do functionally something that no other lens in the world does. So this is the Leica 21mm f2.8 spherical Elmarit as modified by the man himself, Reinhold Muller. Now I do want to make a full video on this lens in the future, talking about it as a lens in greater detail. So how it feels in the hands, how it feels like to shoot, how it renders its pictures on black and white and color film as well, and how it compares to other 21mm lenses like the Voigtlander Nocton. But I want to at least take a few months to a year to actually use this lens and form an opinion on it. So subscribe to stay tuned on that. But in the meantime, I wanted to put out this video first so that you can have some first impressions. Before making this video, I have already put a few rolls through it, and I have to say, I'm really happy. Yes, it is functionally a bit heavier due to the goggles. Yes, it's 2.8 and not f2, but I've been really enjoying it. There's a simplicity to the experience. It's not quite the elegance of a fully integrated viewfinder, as in the R4M, but compared to using an external viewfinder, needing to check meter on one side and then switch the composition on the next, this has been great. And I've also been loving the ability to use a flash. In terms of the first impressions of the pictures that this lens makes, so far they've been looking great. They're clean, not too modern, not too contrasty, and I noticed that it renders textures really nicely as well. The lens that this reminds me the most of in terms of the pictures that it makes and its rendering is probably the 35mm spherical pre-FLE Summilux. It's also kind of similar to the 28mm Summicron as well, clean without being too punchy or contrasty. Now again, I'll save the more detailed look at this lens for the next video because I am going to thoroughly put this lens through the paces, so subscribe to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, enjoy a few more sample pictures. I hope you found today's video interesting. Let me know any of your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.